Good afternoon, good afternoon, good afternoon. Welcome everybody. Happy Friday, happy beginning of the summer, happy Juneteenth, and all good things in between. My name is Mark Hatcher, and I have been with Amazon for 4 years. I work in global sales for Amazon here, and my role is the team lead for the Amazon.com.tr Amazon Turkey team. So my responsibility is to take U.S. sellers who've been successful and help them to expand over into the Turkish marketplace. We've done about 200 sellers to date, and we're poised and ready for a big finish to the year and excited about all that Prime Day will bring, okay? So today I have the distinction of talking to our leader, Mr. Eric Broussard, and we'll talk a lot about our organization, about his path to leadership in our organization, and we will share a lot of good anecdotes in between. But first, let me give you a little something on leadership. Leadership is the fine art of motivating a group of people to act toward achieving a common goal. In a business setting, this can mean directing workers, colleagues, or others with a strategy to meet the company's needs. This can be impromptu, leadership can be domestic or global, leadership can also be tactical or strategic. But for the ISS group, leadership is always Eric Broussard. So with that being said, I'm going to yield now and talk to Eric, and we'll talk a little bit about his path and how he leads at Amazon. Eric, thank you for joining us today, sir.
You're welcome. Thank you.
It is my pleasure. It is my pleasure. So you've been at Amazon 23 years and leading the ISS group for 12, right?
That's correct.
That's correct. Good, good. So tell me about a story. Tell me about how you came to Amazon.
Yeah. So I joined in 1998.
Uh-huh.
And in 1998, as you might imagine, Amazon was only a bookstore.
Right.
Only in Seattle. And we had one fulfillment center. We're down the street, actually, from here, the corporate offices. And the reason I joined, which I think is very relevant to the discussion, it was a very challenging discussion. Mm-hmm. You've got to imagine, in 98, I would call my friends, I grew up in France, so I would call my friends or family members in France, say, oh, I joined this company called Amazon. And people would be like, well, I never heard of it, which you might expect. And be, oh, it's an internet bookstore. Long silence. Mm-hmm. Well, I hope your family kept your room, because this is really weird.
Might have to go back there one day. Huh?
Exactly. The reason I joined, which again I think is relevant, is that in '98, as I started working for Amazon, and I really worked as, the first few months were as a contractor, and I wasn't sure I wanted to really join the company. I was living in the Bay Area. I wasn't sure I wanted to move. But what attracted me to the company, when it was all said and done, was the quality of the people. Mm. And what Jeff had been able to do as early as '98 mm-hmm. is really attract a group of people that was truly passionate about business, where the level of smarts and the passion for what we're trying to accomplish was really, really amazing. And that's what brought me to the company. And I never thought I would stay 23 years. The company went through enormous changes and lots of challenges, as you might expect. And in a lot of instances, I took it a couple years at a time, mm-hmm. feeling like, well, the job I'm doing right now is really interesting. If we can really figure out how this is going to work, I'm going to learn a tremendous amount, and I'll see where we get. And and that's the way you stay 23 years. It's kind of these tranches of opportunities and challenges and rewards that are such that you feel like, wow, I need to keep going and try a little bit more and a little bit better and improve. And you wake up one morning, it's been 23 years, but not really. There's been a lot of tranches of different jobs and opportunities.
Well, yeah, and you mentioned that. You mentioned the different roles and the different responsibilities just kind of in passing. We'll get into the minutia of that later. Tell us about your first role and how you actually decided to come, because I found that kind of fascinating when we discussed it earlier.
Yeah, I mean, so early on, it was really build as you go. Uh-huh. I remember I joined, I didn't quite have a business title. Uh-huh. These were some of the details we'd figure out later. And one of my first roles at Amazon was we looked at expanding into the UK and Germany. So I worked on evaluating the expansion in '98 which led to a couple acquisitions. Actually, we acquired a couple companies. I also built a e-cards website for the company, believe it or not. And at the time, this is also really germane to one of the reasons I stayed, is that even though the e-card site, which we had built as a marketing strategy, as a way to attract traffic to Amazon and convert that traffic to buyers. And for me, it was an amazing experience of building something from scratch. And I really felt the company spent a lot of money and a lot of investments and a lot of opportunity cost in training me in building a store and a site of end-to-end completely from scratch. And that was really germane to my training at Amazon and really learning at a very good level of detail of how do you build the site and whatever, how do you design, how do you look at the customer experience end-to-end and so on and so forth. So I did a lot of work on this. And then moved on and really focused on retail and started building new categories for the company. But these were really germane and formative experiences for me early on about learning about the details of the business, at a reasonably narrow but deep level, which is something I would always recommend for people to do, is that, hey, if you get in the company and you've got a role, it's not so important how broad that role might be early on, but really how good are you going to get, how deep are you going to be about understanding the customer experience in your case, for example, really understanding what the customer and the seller go through so we can really help the seller succeed.
No, that's right. And I think, so thank you for sharing that. And I agree with you. When I think about and you said, building the whole thing from start to finish, I was wondering if your pedigree, I know your pedigree included both Netscape and Bain, if you had that in your background prior to coming to Amazon.
Maybe, but Amazon's unique.
Okay. Say more.
It's so first of all, it's very difficult for me to compare Amazon to other companies because after 23 years, what do I know about any other companies, as you might imagine?
That's correct.
But if you look at the approach we have is reasonably idiosyncratic. Like in my previous careers, as you mentioned, people talked a lot about vision statements, and for me, my impression, at least with some of the companies that I'd seen in the country, were vision statements were very long phrases with very complex words that were hard, that made typically a lot of sense, but were hard to convert into what am I going to do today? What decisions might I make today in light of that statement? And I vividly remember when I joined at Amazon, the vision statement, which is still true today, was Earth's largest selection and Earth's most customer-centric company. And there are a lot of decisions you make day in, day out if you really want to deliver Earth's largest selection. And ISS and the 3P business is a good example of the decision, which took us many iterations to get to. We started with auctions, and we did Z-shops, and then we finally invented the single detail page. Then we invented FBA, but that took. So while my previous experience was really helpful, a lot of it I've learned at Amazon, and it's as you go, you invent and detail and deepen your expertise, but what really applies and works at Amazon. And Amazon's been very successful, but what we're doing and the way we're doing might not be implementable directly in another company, and that's okay.
Well, you mentioned a couple of times, build as you go, or we're constructing things as we're flying. And I think that is a uniqueness to Amazon for sure. And I know people kind of expect it as we evolve. How has your first role at Amazon shaped how you manage the business today?
So as I said, the first thing is that, really building this e-card site early on was kind of really, a good formative years to get a sense of how you build the program, how you build a store, how you build a website, and so on and so on. And then, I was on the retail side for the first part of my career, where I built stores like the kitchen store, launched the home improvement store. And that was also really helpful as I moved to 3P to also understand at a good level how retail works. So how could 3P add value and complement and expand what retail does so well? And retail is a critically important part of what we do, as is 3P, and it's really the magical combination of both that's so powerful in delivering the customer experience that we want to be delivering, which is this very vast selection, a lot of it provided by 3P, very, very competitive prices where retail also plays, a critical role. So, these first phases of my career of like, building tech and then, really looking at how we run a retail site has been really interesting and important, so that as I moved into the 3P business to really understand how the overall puzzle fits together to deliver a great customer experience.
That's good. That's good. What would you say has been your greatest challenge in the leadership role of ISS thus far?
I think one of our challenges as a company's grown so big in so many locations is really how do we ensure that the culture we built in Seattle early on really perdures and it's transplanted and understood well by all the offices, and the talent we've got across the world. That's a challenge because the culture and the quality of the people with the implementation of our leadership principles and how we think about, and Jeff's talked a lot about being right a lot and being truth-seeking is very important. And you want a culture that perdures where people really look for the facts, really look for the data, really look for the truth. And that's a challenge when you've got offices where, especially in the last 18 months, traveling has not been an option. When you've got these really large teams across the world, really ensuring that culture perdures and is implemented rigorously across the different offices and teams is a good challenge.
Yeah, and having such a broadly dispersed organization too can be challenges to maintaining a soul culture. So the spirit of Amazon will probably, because of our size, always be challenged, but it's important that we have good fundamentals and good core items so that we can keep our culture intact. When I'm on interview loops and talking to individuals or in recruitment panels, I always speak to the fact that in our 14 leadership principles, they always start with customer obsession and always end with delivering results. There's a lot of things in between, 12 others that are in between, but we always start with the customer and always end in results. So I think that's a very good thing. So have you ever had a big idea at Amazon that failed, that didn't go well?
Many,
Okay.
yes. So the first thing I'd say, and it's a good question you're asking because it's sometimes a little bit too easy today, 20x years later, to feel like, well, everything Amazon does actually works. That's clearly not the case. A good example, we talked briefly about it, but in order for us to build the 3P business, the third-party business, and really get our sellers to succeed, it took us many iterations from auctions to Z-Shop to the single detail page to FBA. And auctions and Z-Shop didn't pan out. It so happens that we learned a lot from these unsuccessful initiatives. We learned that sellers were willing to work with us, even though we were competing and we had a retail business. That was something very new that, I think a lot of people were skeptical about the idea of having this mixed model. One of the things I've learned is you want to be very careful about launch dates. And as you run projects and the teams and I get very excited about launching a new project, you want to really pay attention that you have to really be ready. And if it means pushing out the launch date, it's never a great outcome, but it's probably a much better thing to do than launching too early and disappointing our customers. And I've had experiences where I've reviewed projects with teams where we stopped the project on the spot to kind of step back and really think through and perfect the project and really ensure that what we're delivering for our customers really meet the bar. So my advice is that as you get in the heat of the battle and you really want the project or the initiative or the new store to launch, to really be very cognizant of it's got to meet the bar for our customers. And even though you might end up having very challenging discussions about postponing, delaying, changing, it's okay. And that I've learned, I've got the scars to, as I've went through this different initiative of, trying to tailor, the tricky balance between time to market and really ensuring we don't disappoint customers.
Well, thank you for sharing that. I mean, I think that type of care and concern for the customer resonates across Amazon. I mean, I'm sure everybody online here knows it, but Amazon yesterday launched a $150 million initiative around supporting the development of black business through the Black Business Accelerator. And that launch date was moved out a couple of times to make sure everything was in order. So that really aligns with what Eric was saying. Eric, what would you say has been your biggest accomplishment since you've been here in the 23 years?
I think it's maybe not a single accomplishment, but what we've done for small entrepreneurs across the world is something that really is really great. It's like the number of people we've enabled and supported to build their own businesses, to build their own brands. And some of the sellers are in the US, some are in France, some are in Germany, some are in Japan. Some of them only sell in their domestic market. Some of them sell across the world. But the empowerment that we've provided, and a lot of our sellers came to Amazon, never talked to anyone at Amazon.
That's right.
They used tools, self-service tools, and they had a really great idea, a really good product, a good price, and we provided to them a set of mechanisms and tools that have really contributed to their success. That I feel, it's good. It feels good that we've been able to really, for real, enable at a good level of scale across a large number of countries. These small entrepreneurs, these really, really smart people, really hardworking, and how we've enabled them. I think it's something that across the many years I've worked in the business is always kind of leaves a smile on your face of like what we're doing is good.
Well, empowerment and enablement are good things, and they resonate and they play well amongst our seller base as well as our customer base. You talked about the global perspective, and I know that you've led several different global initiatives, but one of the things that stood out, you talked about the formation and development of our Luxembourg location. Tell us about that from the early days, and tell us about how you started, and were you the first person there, or was there any backstory to that?
I mean, the backstory. So first of all, I was not employee number one in Luxembourg. I was employee number two, which is obviously like that's a huge bummer. Like I'll never be number one. But the backstory was I had a personal interest of moving back to Europe. I grew up there. Moved to the U.S. and I started my career. And I was interested personally to go to the EU. And I saw at the time, having worked in the U.S. that 3P was going to be really critical to our success. And Amazon provided me a really awesome opportunity of like moving to Luxembourg and building that third-party organization and supporting our sellers in Europe. So that's what I do. It's like early on in Luxembourg, we're two of us in a rental office. We'd log on, we didn't have the intranet, and we'd log on, remotely into the office, and it was an adventure and kind of even more of a startup that I had experienced on Amazon when I joined in '98. And it panned out so I was passionate about, being in Europe and having an impact. And having spent a bunch of years in the US at Amazon, I understood the culture a little bit and, where this was going. So it was really exciting it was risky. In many ways. It's like you show up and you're an office of two after having left, Seattle in a business that basically didn't exist, and the third-party sales at the time was very, very tiny and very limited to basically media products. So it was a substantial risk, but also a fun risk to take in the context of the energy that we brought and knowing that, I was pretty convinced Amazon was going to pan out in a really good way. So it was really fun to do.
It must be good to start a new location, so that must be pretty fun. You talked about the origin and before you came here. I know you did, graduate school, undergrad and graduate school in Europe first before coming here, and then you came here and took a big jump in going to Stanford as well. Tell us about when you're leaving Stanford or you're trying to find your internship and make the transition back into the corporate workforce. What are some of the things that came to mind, and what are some of the companies that you considered before you landed with us?
Yeah, well, so what happened is that while I was at Stanford, I did a summer internship at Microsoft, and I really liked the company at the time. It was 93, 94. And that was really helpful for me because I saw a company where the talent, the quality of the talent at the time was really impressive. And when I talk about what happened to me when I came to Amazon, that's really I felt like wow, these people are as smart or smarter than what I've seen a few years ago at Microsoft. And it was really germane and helpful to think about, oh, Amazon is a company I want to join for. So, I want to join and I want to work for. So that's the way, this was really helpful, is kind of having had this exposure to different companies and getting a sense, when I landed at Amazon, of like, wow, that's a company where the culture resonates for me. Mm-hmm. The quality of the people and the passion and the level of challenges we're facing is really what I want to be doing. And my experience at Netscape was super helpful because I could see how the web was just changing everything and was going to touch every single portion. And that's where, oh, wow, Amazon is taking that explosion of usage into e-commerce felt like something that was really worth trying.
The Netscape, if I recall, were like the first to market in browsers or something like that, right?
Exactly.
And they kind of relinquished that to Microsoft and their grip on enterprise, right?
Exactly.
So it's interesting indeed. What would you say is the greatest developmental need in the ISS organization?
Well, so ISS has done a really good job at enabling sellers across the world. At the same time, it's completely day one. Mm-hmm. When I look at the
I can attest.
When you look at the types of opportunity we have in front of us, it's enormous. Mm-hmm. And while we've done a good job or a reasonable job at enabling these sellers I talked about, and the work you're doing, for example, in helping sellers get into Turkey is a good example of that, where, we're barely scratching the surface. It's day one and it's really early. And so, and we're making a lot of investments in tech to continue helping and building tools to really make global selling trivially easy. We've really innovated in global selling, and Fulfillment by Amazon has been one of these killer products where it's really transformative for sellers to bring their product locally and offer them, with a Prime program really quickly and efficiently to customers. But as I look forward, there are still a lot of investments we're making to continue to dramatically simplify the experience of all the sellers, no matter where they are, for them to sell everywhere we are. And again, I feel it's totally day one. There's so much more we need to be doing to enabling all countries, all selection. There are a bunch of market segments. We're also, trying to expand B2B, being a good example where we've made really good progress, but there's a lot more in front of us and a lot more opportunities. So it's exciting because when you talk to sellers, that's also what they tell you, is like they see not only the great business they might have been doing, but also how much more they may be able to do with us. So that's what I want to keep pushing and moving forward with.
Well, developmentally, it can definitely be done. And I think with your leadership style, that would help. How would you, I know over the years you've had a lot of different individuals who you've led and, helped to come into prominence. How would you describe your leadership style? What is the uniqueness to the way Eric leads teams?
Yeah, well, I don't know if it's unique in any way, shape, or form, but I guess, there are a couple of ways you can look at managing. Mm-hmm. The first one is, you want to be involved and part of every decision. And you view your role as a manager as, I need to make sure that every decision comes to my desk. And I need to be part of each step of the way. The way I add value is being part of these decisions and being necessary to these decisions to occur. The other way to look at it is my necessary involvement is potentially a defect. And that's what I ascribe to, is that, as I look at teams across the world, it's like, if I'm really needed to make a decision, I try to understand why am I needed and what would it take so I'm no longer needed, so the teams can run on their own. And that approach, I think, has been very important to the way I've been managing, but I think a lot of the leaders at Amazon have been able to scale. Mm-hmm. Because if you're no longer necessary, well, you can do something else. And you can move on to the next country, to the next program, to the next team. Mm-hmm. And that's really empowering as a leader, as you think about how you evolve. And I think it applies both as a leader, but also as an individual contributor. Sometimes of like, why am I necessary to do this task? Could this task be automated? Could this task be self-service? Are there opportunities so that I can move on and grow and do something else and solve other problems? So that's the way I've always tried with people who are working directly for me or with the teams I'm working with across the world of like, if I'm needed, well, maybe there's something to be done, so I'm no longer needed, and the team can grow and expand on its own, and I can continue scaling and build new ventures for the company.
No, that's good. And I think, you know, I was talking to another leader in an interview similar to this one, and he talked about hire good people, train them well, monitor performance, but kind of stay out of their way. And so that's a good thing, because if you hire well, then that doesn't mean you don't have to coach, but you still have to,
Yeah.
you know, let them do their jobs in that way. So if you had to speak to a legacy that you want to leave, not just at in ISS, but at Amazon overall, what do you want to be remembered about Eric when his days at Amazon are done?
Yeah, it's a good question. I'm hoping I'll be, well, ideally remembered for the people I've hired and the quality of the teams I've put in place. I've done a lot of recruiting over the years, and you know, I've been able to bring some really amazing talent to the company. A lot of the people have been at Amazon for many, many years, and that's great. You know, that's a good legacy of like feeling like, you know, the day I move on, hopefully, you know, there's an obvious succession plan, and the teams are very stable and high quality with a good level of depth. That's a good legacy I would want to leave.
Well, leaving good people behind is a good one, because you can ensure that the company continues to flourish and
you know, it applies both when, you know, if I were to leave Amazon, but you know, it applies when I move from one country to another, from one project to another. It's like that has applied, you know, many times over. And if you're a manager at Amazon, I think that's something I would advise you to do, is like build really strong team and move on. You know, it's like it's also part of building your own career and growing, of like ensuring that the teams are stable enough that you can grow and take more scope, or move to different projects and take some risk for your career to ensure you keep growing.
For a developing individual who's trying to figure out when it's time to make that next move, who may be at the L5, L6 level, how do they ascertain, or how do they figure out when it's time to make that move?
I think one knows.
You think so?
I think one knows when, if you're no longer quite, first of all, you know, again, I stayed that many years because net, it's pretty exciting.
Yeah.
You know, it's challenging, it's demanding. I mean, it's a high bar, as it should be. I mean, our customers are very demanding. But that's part of what I think everyone, no matter what the level, should question. If you're not really excited and really learning, it might be time to consider doing something else. There might be a bunch of reasons why you might not be as excited as you could be. But if that's the case, it's going to limit your ability to learn. You know, it's like, it's challenging. It's hard to learn and challenge yourself every day to expand. And so if you don't have the energy because it's not that compelling to you, it may be time to find that place where it will be compelling, and therefore you really will give the best of yourself.
I was sandbagging a bit there, because I know in talking with some of the others and some of the leaders, they always say probably 18 to 24 months you should be able to move the needle in the business and figure out if you're going to make a greater impact where you are, or to move to somewhere else. Because if you stayed around that long, typically you've proven that you're probably a pretty good Amazonian. Now you just have to figure out how to make the greatest impact.
I mean, it may be a good, you know, it probably also depends on, you know, the job, the
business,
complexity, what you're learning, and it's okay. You don't have to have a firm role, but I think, you know, really ensuring you put yourself in a position where you're really learning is what you'd like, I think.
So Amazon, I mentioned earlier, Amazon recently committed $150 million to the BBA, or Black Business Accelerator. And, you know, just at a glance, I know that we're still trying to figure out the right level of engagement and involvement. But is there space for that level of development within our portfolio, within ISS portfolio?
Yeah, absolutely. So, you know, we've had a bunch of discussion, and there's an initiative going, is that I feel that global selling is one of these initiatives that should contribute to helping Black entrepreneurs grow globally. That's what we do every day, you know, well, maybe very well. So, you know, some of the discussions we've had and some of the initiatives that are being put in place is that how do we help these Black entrepreneurs who might already have an online business, an e-commerce business on Amazon in the US, grow internationally?
Yeah.
And what we offer there is really a set of tools and training and so on and so forth that's unique in the industry. And as you know, a lot of sellers have done it. And I think so from that perspective, it's completely aligned to what we do, and therefore we should be really great at doing it and really helping these black entrepreneurs, grow in Japan or grow their businesses in Europe, maybe you in Turkey. These are things that I think are really congruent and consistent with the type of investments you are describing.
I think, and there's space for that. I think that once the BBA team figures out the footprint, we just have to figure out how we can, integrate with those guys and make sure that we help to grow the business. After the uprisings of last summer and a lot of incidents around race and around, police killings and other things like that, there has been a shift around awareness of what's going on organizationally as well as in communities. How has that newfound awareness impacted the way you lead and impacted the way you messaged our organization?
I think there's been a good recognition at Amazon that we need to be much more aware, as you're just describing. So one of the way it's impacted is this initiative of very concretely, how can we help the black entrepreneurs, build businesses globally and really focus and dedicate resources where we can to really contribute to their success. And I think throughout the leadership, there's also this awareness. I think that's better, but work in progress of really ensuring that we hire, we develop, and we focus on minorities more than we might have done.
Okay. And, I think that's a great caveat. I know that a lot has been spent internally on, diversity initiatives and things around diversity. And, I read a quote yesterday that said, the most diverse companies are the most successful companies. And I tend to agree with that, but not just in the scope of race, but I just think in a diverse scheme of thought. And I know we tend to over-index towards having technology background. What has been your experience with diversity, and how do you feel like it shapes an organization?
I mean, ISS is massively diverse.
Yeah. Oh, yes.
You know what I'm saying? Is the entire thing we do is an incredibly diverse set of people. And the richness we've brought to the company is unbelievable. The fact that we've got teams in Germany or in Japan or in China or in the US, and that these teams work cooperatively incredibly well. I mean, I read docs that have been written by 12 countries.
Yeah.
And that's, the voice of our sellers, the voice of the world, sellers across the world. We've got a team in Vietnam and a team in Japan and a team in Seattle. And that's been incredibly powerful. If you look at the business, so, I mean, you don't need to convince me that diversity really has an impact, because that's what this team's been built upon. You know what I'm saying? There's, and on all the permutation, to your very good point, on all the permutations of diversity, geographic diversity and minorities, and because that's what the world is made of, and that's who our sellers are.
That's right.
So that's also the way we've built an incredibly diverse business, because our sellers are so diverse and therefore offer these very diverse products. So you go on Amazon.com and you have these amazing products from India and products from Japan, and that has created and has been compounding and enabling this vision of Earth's largest selection. Because we've got teams in India and all over the world, and you're bringing the selection into Turkey. So that for me is kind of the testament of hey, do you get a richer team and richer business results if you have a diverse team? Yeah, that's us. Exactly.
For sure. Another thing that comes to mind is that we're constantly evolving, and we're constantly servicing diverse customers from different countries and different continents and different things like that. I wonder if I'm not wondering, I'll ask you if, in fact, you have a vision for, where we will expand to next from the ISS perspective.
Yeah. So your question is also a very good one, because it goes back to this idea of Earth's largest selection. We don't. Yeah. No. It's I don't have teams everywhere. We don't have the selection from every customer, from every seller, from every country. So we're continuing to expand. And as we have a business in Turkey. We've got a team in India. We've got a team in Vietnam, and we continue. And we've recently announced that the sellers we're accepting on our platform, it's dramatic. We added to the list of countries sellers can be listing from, very measurably. So that's an ongoing process. I'm not sure what exactly the next country is going to be. I always tell my teams, let's keep focusing on the countries we currently have and really, drive improvement as quickly as we possibly can. But it's an ongoing process. We've been at it for many years, and it's still an unfinished business. And what you would presume will happen, we'll continue expanding to broaden the type of selection we're providing customers, as we just did recently.
Mm-hmm. And that's what's really interesting about that is thinking about the visionary aspects of it, because I'm sure 20 years ago, your vision wasn't what it was, 15 years ago, 10 years ago, 5 years ago.
Yeah.
So it makes me think about the vision now. So if this is nirvana and we look out 5 years, what are people saying about Amazon first and then ISS second? What would you think?
So I think it's this continuing evolution of a customer anywhere in the world is going to be stunned by the selection that's available to them from all over the world.
Shout out to the flywheel.
Really, really quick.
Yeah.
And again, you cannot say that today from every customer. There are a bunch of customers that are still underserved by Amazon, or it might take a longer time to get the product. The selection might be some. So that's we're going to continue on that path of really ensuring that ISS contributes to that vision. And this is what the ISS teams do every day. It's like contributing to that vision and enabling. And what's very important is we had a couple of discussions this week is that over time the business has become more complex. Mm-hmm. The number of programs we have, the sophistication of the tools, the number of permutation because of the number of countries and categories has only increased. Does it mean that the business complexity is increased for sellers? Yes, to some extent. And I think we need to be very aware of this and really cognizant of the fact that we want to continue to be trivially easy for any seller from anywhere, no matter how small, to be able to sell across the world. So I think that's where ISS, to your question, is that what I would want is that in 5 years, our sellers are going to say, wow, I sell in more countries to more customers than I used to 5 years ago, but it's actually easier. Uh-huh. And it's easier said than done, but it's very important that you'd be a seller in the US and you list your product and it's available across all these different marketplaces across the world. And we fulfill and we've provided those services so you don't have to deal with that complexity. And that's what we do, hiding the complexity so our sellers can do what they do great, which is finding and inventing and building awesome products at great prices.
Yeah, I think that's the Amazon way for sure. The pandemic has forced us all to reevaluate not only just priorities, but how we manage business. It has greatly impacted the Amazon supply chain and the supply chain of many of our sellers. Yeah. How has the pandemic altered, the vision that you have for our organization? And from a pandemic perspective, as we look to come back into the offices, what do you see as some of the changes that we'll have to endure or work through?
Well, the one thing I would say is that my personal perception of working from home changed dramatically.
I'd agree. I agree.
I used to think well, that's hard. If I need to be at home today, in order for me to be productive, it's going to be very difficult. Obviously, that just shifted massively. That's the first thing. I'll come back to that. The second thing for ISS is that for us, working remotely was not new. Most of my teams are not in the US. I've got a really good team in the US, but also I've got teams in Europe and in Japan and so on and so forth. So, working remotely, and actually if you talk to the teams that are located far away, they're going to tell you that us working from home was actually an improvement because suddenly everyone's on chime. It's only one person at a time speaking. The audio is much better than maybe in a large conference room. There was actually an improvement that we cannot lose when you go back to the office. So what challenges will we have? Well, we've got a bunch of opportunity of going back to the office, but recognizing that we can be more flexible. And you saw the latest, communication about the Amazon policy where it's going to be, 3 days in the office, 2 days, which a testament to that flexibility. And I think I'm still digesting how we can really ensure we capture the good learnings of we've had teams incredibly productive working from home. Mm-hmm. The way everyone adapted has been incredible. At the same time, I think everyone says they miss the office to some extent. And finding the right balance between that flexibility and that convenience of being at home at least some days of the week, but also seeing real human beings and not just only your dog in the basement, is something that would be good to do once in a while. And doing these interactions and all hands face to face, is part of what we do. In addition, there's another aspect that's really important to me is traveling. A big part of my job was traveling and be with the teams in the office, in France or in Germany or in Japan or in China. And that I've not done, obviously, for
Yes.
business. So that I'm really looking forward to. Forward to going back and traveling and meeting a lot of the team members are new. It's been a year and a half. So that's also a transition I'm actually looking forward to doing. And hopefully people will be nice enough to come to the office when I go there. But that's something we'll need to adjust also.
Well, as an individual who over-indexes on interpersonal communication, I do miss the office, and I'll tell you, the interpersonal is a little different when you have teenagers and a 5-year-old at home, because it's a whole bunch of things going on there. So as we get ready to come down home stretch of this interview, I would like to ask, a little bit more fun stuff as we close out. So we just talked about the pandemic, and we talked about some of the changes that folks made. Did you develop a guilty pleasure over the course of the pandemic? Or were you disciplined enough to stay serene?
No. It's a good question. That's where, I think like the flexibility at home made working out much more convenient and easier.
I wish.
Yeah, no, but like, for me, like, you're in the office, you're going to work out, at the end of the day, well, you're at home. That flexibility that I think a lot of people really enjoy has been like, for me, it's been a lot easier to go and work out and go for a run midday, or that's been. I don't know if it's guilty in any way, but it's good. Yeah.
No, that's a good thing. Most people talk about the COVID-19 in terms of pounds. Like they put in 19 pounds over the 16 or 18 months that they've been out of the office. So when I was saying guilty, I wish my guilty pleasure was working out. It wasn't, but that's a good thing. Okay, so I'd like to close out by. I have a speed round of questions, which I call like binary blasts, and they're just one shot. So you answer, yes or no by binary. Okay. So let's try that before we get out of here. You ready to go there with me?
Okay.
Okay. So the first question I'd like to ask you is, if friends are traveling from the U.S. to your homeland, to Europe, over to, and they want to go to one place, and you had to choose one of the two, is it the Louvre or the Eiffel Tower?
I think the Eiffel Tower is
Why would you say the Eiffel Tower?
The view is just amazing.
Yeah, I love the Eiffel Tower.
Yeah, it's unique. It's get ready, long lines, not incredibly well organized.
Yeah.
But
so you say go up too?
Go to the top.
Yeah. Okay.
Go to the top on a beautiful day. Only that view.
Okay. All right. And your superiors, previous superiors, and current superiors, who is the most customer-centric leader? Is it Andy Jassy or Jeff Wilkie? What would you say?
I've never interacted with Andy Jassy a lot, so that's a little bit of a hard question.
Okay.
But it's like at any of the senior levels, what you'll see at Amazon, and what I think is surprising, and hopefully at every level through the organization, is that we make these decisions where people are new to Amazon, like, oh, that's really customer focused.
That's right.
And we make this decision really for the long term. Like I've been part of a lot of decisions where like, oh, that's going to lead to a company that's going to be not as profitable as it could be if it didn't make that decision in the short term.
Yeah.
And that's tremendous. That's always super exciting to be able to make this decision and feel really comfortable about making those decisions or being part of this broader discussion. And I've seen Jeff Wilkie make a lot of those decisions over the years that end up panning out in the long term in building that trust with our customers or selling partners.
It was I spoke with one of the senior vice presidents of Verizon recently, and she was talking about meeting with the Amazon team while building out the Kindle. And she said they came in with an idea like, this is how we're going to do things. And she said the folks at Amazon pushed back and said, that's engineering, that's not customer. well, you need 3 to 5 clicks, or you're going to lose the people. And she said it forced them to go back and redesign the product and be a better partner for Amazon. It made them better as individuals. So I thought that was a good.
I often give the example that we've got a widget on the detail page, which tells you, oh, if you bought this product already, it tells you you already bought this product. Well, if you test that widget, you test a store with that widget or without the widget. The store that has that widget sells less. So it's a sales prevention widget. And we invested scarce resources in building something that in the short term drives lower sale. But it's all under the concept or the understanding that, oh, that contributes to building trust with your customers. Oh, we're really competent. We really know what's going on. We're really helping them save time and avoid mistakes of buying twice the same product. And that in the long run, across many of these smaller features or bigger features, is going to compound in building a better trust with your customers and a better long-term business.
Yeah, oh yeah, I totally agree with that. And it helps to not have to undo things you bought already, right?
Exactly.
Okay, so you're going away for a weekend with your wife, and you can only take one. Is it white wine or red wine, and why?
It's red Burgundy.
Red Burgundy,
because,
okay, from the Burgundy region.
There's nothing like red Burgundy. This is the French in me talking about.
Red Burgundy, what do you like about red Burgundy? As a budding wine connoisseur.
It has a flavor that just it's unique, and it's very to me, and again it's like it's the voice of one person, but it's very light. It has these flavor that are more like raspberries and strawberries, very light. The color is like very, not a Bordeaux that's very dark. Just like these are beautiful wines.
Do you have a favorite brand of the Burgundy?
No, not really. I mean, like any high class quality, it's okay. So if you're asking what I'd like, we can talk.
Okay, we'll definitely talk.
Oh, yeah.
So if you're going to be a visiting professor for 1 week at one of these institutions, which one would it be and why? At INSEC or at Stanford? Visiting professor for 1 week.
I think I'd pick INSEC. And I would pick INSEC.
That's his undergrad alma mater, by the way.
Yeah, so. in Paris. And the reason I would pick is there are a lot of people who would go to Stanford who are a lot more qualified than I am. And Stanford's ability to attract the best in the world from the US is a no-brainer. But going back to your alma mater from where you grew up and maybe trying to convey a little bit about how different it might be in the US, how important entrepreneurship is, and so on and so on, would be a fun thing to do, actually. Yeah, would be very fun. To give back in a way,
If they ever see this, if this ever on the web, you might get a call now. See?
We'll see.
You might get a call. So what was the last thing you bought off Amazon Marketplace?
The last thing I bought on Amazon was there are battery connectors for a small project I'm working on at home to improve the family camper.
Oh.
So
are you on the road a lot in your camper?
Yeah. So we have a little family camper and something really fun to do. And as part of that, I keep improving it, so to speak. And so I bought connectors, because and it's one of the things. It's also amazing because it's also one of the things like through COVID and through these projects. You just realize the depths of the selection we have. We truly have like every possible permutation of every single part you may be looking at. ICE has done a good job at recruiting all these sellers and providing that selection. So
that's good. And if I recall correctly, so for the camper trips, you have 3 boys, right?
Correct.
Okay. How old are they?
They're 22, 20, and 15.
Okay. So you got a nice little window there in them. Okay. And last but certainly not least, are you reading anything good?
So I guess I'll say 2 things. The first thing is that not something I'm reading now, but there's one book that I've read in the past. And that was actually one of the book club with the S team. Jeff was very, very nice. And at some point when I was in Europe, did book clubs in Europe. I was part of the book. And that's The Goal. And that's one of these business books that talks about really...
the book is called The Goal, by the way.
The Goal. Exactly.
We'll share it.
And it really addresses how do you think about bottleneck and prioritization in a world like Amazon? And it's incredibly relevant to what we do, what I do, but it's really what everyone does. And I think the esteem has been quoted many times as this is a really influential book for people to think about, and it really applies to what you do day in, day out. And I think it applies similarly to how you think about projects and initiatives you might be working on, which is real, but also how you think about your career. And how you think about, you want to expand and you have a set of goals. Well, what are the things that's the most limiting? Or the most important skill you should be learning about so you're not prevented from expanding as you would want to expand.
You heard that, everybody, the goal, and there's layers to it. There's layers to it, so.
And the book I'm currently reading is Beloved.
Beloved?
Yeah.
Okay. Oh, I've read that. It's pretty good.
Very.
Michelle Obama?
Yes.
Yeah, pretty good. Pretty good. Well,
interesting.
I have two books that are favorite of mine, and we kind of talked about them. The Alchemist by Paulo Coelho. That is one.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah, and very good. And then the other is The Four Agreements. And I know we kind of talked about it. So we're going to fix that for you. So as we close out, I want to give you The Four Agreements. Got this for you today. And Paulo Coelho.
Thank you.
Individual.
All right. Thank you very much.
So again, guys, this is presence over perfection. It means that you don't have to be perfect, but you have to be present. Thank you for joining me and Eric today to hear his story, to hear about how we're doing great things in ISS and how Amazon overall is emerging and continuing to grow. And I just want to say thank you again for joining us.
Thank you very much. It was very fun.
It's been a pleasure, and hopefully we'll do it again soon.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.